All right, so I'm back with another guest. Cheryl Shah is with me today. She's very kind and she's kind enough to accept that invitation when we reached out to her. Cheryl is a meditation teacher. She teaches mindfulness and helps young people and, in fact, everyone at workplaces with your custom training programs and help people take care of their well being. You're a mother, a wife, and you've devoted your life to people's well-being, which is why we are having a discussion because um, we see somebody in you when we were researching about your work um, who cares about people, cares about community, and your work reflects that. So thank you very much, Cheryl, for accepting this invitation. Very excited, and I don't know where do I start from, but generally what I ask people is, what's your story? What got you on this path?
Ah, thank you, Satendra. I'm really excited to be here. Uh, so what got me here? So I really just started on my own mindfulness journey to uh, just be a better parent to my daughters and to give them the best upbringing that I could, and wanted to break the cycle of, dysfunctions in my own family life. Throughout the years, I worked full-time in corporate finance, working long hours. My husband and I didn't have any family in town, so we really did it by ourselves. And so it was great, really. I didn't have an opportunity to feel any loneliness. I had a lot of people around me, a lot of friends. And so I started teaching in 2014 mindfulness meditation through UC San Diego here. And then slowly developed a self-compassion practice, really starting to kind of connect with myself. But I think in the past 5 years, I would say loneliness has really hit me pretty hard. Even though I'm married, I have kids, I have some wonderful friends. I think it's just been really difficult in this transition, finding those right, authentic friendships and connections, which I think is just a basic human need. And so what I discovered is I really can't have a true connection with other people until I am fully connected to myself. And so I've really been working on that with my own self-compassion practice, and really just kind of learning how to take that pause in the moment to be sure I make decisions that align with my values in life, which help me connect to myself. So it's a little bit about my personal story, and it's still I think it's an ongoing process and really an adventure of exploration, through curiosity.
Yeah, I think you're right. Our stories go along with our lives. It just evolves. But interesting thing you mentioned about loneliness. That a lot of people kind of get confused with the word that it's just the absence of people. And number two, we look for the antidote to loneliness. Seemingly sounds like going out in the world, in the community, and try to make more friends. Um, but I always, so when I teach, I always tell people that number one, it's not the absence of people around us. Definitely not. You could be in the middle, you could be at Times Square and you could still be lonely and you could have 1,000 friends. In fact, which is the case with the social media personalities, like having millions of people, or just for the sake of calling them friends. But people, that's not the reality. In fact, we are now 8 billion plus people, more than ever on this planet, and there's more loneliness. And the second thing is starting with self. I don't think if I am not connected with myself, like you rightly said, looking inwards, and if I try and form friendships, just hoping that somebody is going to come into my life, maybe become a friend and help me overcome this. Um, I think the perception would be that somebody who you try to be friends with will find some sort of emptiness inside us. They will look at us and find nothing because we don't have that connection. And I think essentially that's what people look for when we connect with them, is that who am I connecting with? Who am I talking to? Does this person has a sense of connection with self? Because that's what we radiate. Um, can you talk a little bit about this experience of discovering self? And because you know, you've taught mindfulness at UC, what is the confusion among young adults and students at university campuses? What are their top challenges when they look for that self through various means, meditation or otherwise?
Well, I think you kind of named it. Our younger generation has grown up, or maybe they didn't grow up. My daughters got on social media in middle school. Um, Social media is a good and an evil, right? So I think, we're stuck on our technology. And I don't think it's just younger people. I think it's, everyone stuck on their phones. How many likes am I going to get? How many people are going to see this and comment? And it feels very lonely when you're excluded. And trust me, I'm 53 years old and I feel that loneliness when I get on social media and am excluded. I am very upfront about this. So can you imagine how that must feel for people in high school and in college when your whole self-worth is put on, social media? So I think, that's a lot of it, and being on your phone all the time. We don't have, with the pandemic and everything is remote, we don't have as much in-person authentic connections anymore. And this younger generation is really growing up this way of, kind of being behind a screen. So I think that's causing a big part of the problems.
Yes, true. And I also think uh, the very reason this whole social media thing started 10, 20 years ago was that the whole the narrative was that to connect with people or to bring people together, to connect with people you care about, but it looks like everything else is happening but that.
Mm-hmm.
It's some platforms, without naming those, are just kind of keeping people. They're doing everything using their algorithms to stay people hooked to the platform. Everything else is happening. Strain on the eyes and low self-worth and the cracks of darkness and low self-esteem and insecurities and FOMOs and bullying and everything else is happening. But that connection, I think the point was to connect people online so they could connect offline, but we've not met our social media friends in a lot of cases ever. And I don't think we will. Um, and I don't think it's going anywhere. But how do you see that in current day lifestyle? Our lives can't function without social medias, particularly younger people. What would you do if you had some power, or what would you teach your daughters, by the way, and to prevent from
So
this?
I think this is where mindfulness, meditation, and self-compassion really comes in. Many times people think of meditation, and it is, right? You sit for a certain amount of time, and it's a practice, right? You're aware of what's happening around you, your mind, your body. But the other piece is really off the cushion. And if we can check in with ourselves and take that pause when we're on social media and see how it really is making us feel, like how is it really, and we can feel that emptiness, it's time to get off of it then. And so I made a pretty big statement because I used to be very, very socially active on social media. when my girls were in middle school, and I started to notice the effect on me. And I also noticed that my daughters were starting to really be on it a lot. So I cut it off. I disabled it altogether. And it was hard, but I wanted to be that role model for my children to say, yeah, it's got its place. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing. I even use it for my business. But I think you also have to take care of yourself and make those healthy boundaries. And so now my daughters have learned when to take it off their phone. My younger daughter isn't even on it because she feels the impact. So I think it's important to just take that, for people to learn to check in with themselves with kindness, to say, this is really hard. What I'm looking at is actually making me feel worse than, something I'm doing just mindlessly. If it doesn't, it's all about the impact on you. If it's not impacting you that way, then keep using it. I think it's different for everyone.
Yeah, and I think the way these algorithms function is once you get some inclination towards, however, and say somebody sends you some kind of maybe a short video or a reel, and then you start getting attracted to it, and then you find yourself in the middle of it more and more so, and that kind of snowballs very quickly, even before you realize. And yes, you're right, it's not all negative, it has its own perks, but then uh, there's no school of wisdom or knowledge that teaches you that what things to avoid and what uh, how to use it. So sort of detoxifying self once you are addicted, or how to prevent yourself from slipping into that dark zone of social media. Really bad things are happening on it, and good things are also happening. I think you're right that I like that word role model because it kind of illustrates what not to do and what to do with it. I want to talk to you about something you said is looking inside through mindfulness and meditation. Um, in my experience, and sort of a personal story, when you talk to younger people and you try to guide them within and help them look inside, sometimes it's a very scary place to be in, and not just for younger people, for all of us. Um, Sometimes there is emptiness, sometimes there are regrets, sometimes there is pain and trauma, and sometimes it's the mistakes or the decisions that we've made in the past that come back to haunt us. And when you look inside, you can't you can't just unsee that, you can't unlearn that, those kind of things. And in my experience, I've really, after I started to realize that it's happening with younger people a lot. Um, I got more careful, obviously, but I'm curious, how has it worked for you? Have you had any experiences with your learners? Something like in the process of finding self, has there been a negative impact?
Oh, of course. People, when I teach, and I mostly teach in our community, so it's really adults. I have taught undergrad students as well on campus. But, a lot of people it's really hard for them to be in silence and stillness because of our minds, right? And it's so much common humanity. Every one of us has this thinking mind that's telling us all these stories. And so, yeah, a lot of people do notice patterns, right? So when I teach, it's all about uncovering our patterns. It's noticing all my anxieties or my stresses or my regrets, just like you said, right? And so that comes up all the time when I teach. And then, then we judge ourselves, and that's when the self-compassion comes in. Can we be kind to ourselves? Because a lot of it's just how we were raised, right? Our parents just didn't know, right? Especially from a, culture of, immigrating here from India. Like, we had to just survive, So, yeah, absolutely. I think these patterns are uncovered. But the thing is, we can't begin to change unless we accept what's happening in the moment, until we say, oh, yes, I have some sadness, I have some emptiness, or I have a lot of worries and anxiety. With compassion, then we can start to heal that and really make different choices. For me, this whole practice of meditation and self-compassion has given me the ability to make better choices. That's giving me a better quality of life.
Very interesting. And so, particularly with younger people finding it difficult to sit for a longer period, what do you think happens when you begin to meditate? The first perception people have is the whole idea of mindfulness or any other kind of technique is to sort of seize the thoughts or pause the functions of the mind, which is the producing thoughts, negative, positive, and just stay nothing. But that in Hindi we call shunya, stillness. That's zeroing down everything to nothingness, which is a very very difficult state to be in. But how do you tackle that, or what do you think about when you teach people? What is the perception that they should have of any practice, mindfulness, or even vipassana if you practice that?
Yeah, so I think that's the first myth when I
Hmm.
teach, is people think that they have to get rid of their thoughts.
Hmm.
But that's not true.
Yeah.
We have to be aware that the thought is there and then come back, right? The practice is to come back. We're never going to get rid of our thoughts. When I guide meditations, I always say our mind thinks like our heart beats. We don't want our heart to stop beating.
Yeah.
So we are aware of the thought, and we get insight. That's what vipassana is: insight of our patterns, insight, the wisdom that comes in when we sit in silence. We come back to the body, right? What body sensations, what the breath, all this stuff. If a sound comes in, yeah, the mind is thinking, and we come back. But the experience that I have from teaching for so many years is people just can't stand being with their mind. And they want they think if they take this meditation class, oh, all that thinking will go away. The thinking's not going to go away. We just have to notice it and notice that it's not our reality. Many times we think our thoughts are our reality when they're not. And when they're challenging thoughts, that's when that compassion comes in. And often when I teach, can we have non-judgmental awareness? Meaning, it's not good or bad, it's just a thought. Just like a sound isn't good or bad, it's just a sound, right? Or a body sensation. And so I think we slowly start changing our relationship to our mind and not, getting overwhelmed by it, but we keep coming back and we keep coming back. Now, don't get me wrong, I think when we practice long enough, we can slowly get some space between all the chatter, and it slows down. They're not as racing. But I think it's really, really challenging, and that's why a lot of people don't, do mindfulness meditation. And I think a lot of people, there's all forms of meditation, right?
Yeah.
And I also think a lot of people here in the US, think it's very religious based, or it's
Yeah.
all kind of like woo-woo, right? I try to really get those myths out, saying no, it's all based in science. There's so much research done on the
Yes.
benefits, right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
You mentioned something about people can't stand there, being with their minds or that that image of the mind, and that kind of takes me back to a thought that when you are forming new relationships, or let's say you are friends with somebody, eventually that person is going to find some space in your mind, and if that makes you think, and that makes me think also, like if you can't stand your own mind, what makes you think other people who will eventually find a place, who will be able to look inside your mind when they are in a relationship of any kind, because we reflect that through our thoughts. um, what makes you think these people will find this a pleasant space to be in, and which is the whole foundation of any relationship. If you don't want to be here, why would you push somebody else to be there? You yourself won't go. And I wonder, what is it that they hope they should find? First thing. Second, when you start meditating, let's say, is it an objective driven meditation that we are all after? Like, hey, I want to be more decisive, more clarity in my decisions. I want to be more productive. I want to be more calm. I want to be this or that. Um, Anything. I'm not saying those are bad objectives to have, but then when you have an objective, in my opinion, in my experience as well, you are investing half your awareness into that potential objective that you've set with meditation. And what that does is that's a scattered awareness. So half of your awareness is there when you're practicing, and the other half is like I've said this before. I kind of like meditating with one eye open and see, hey, is something happening, or am I more pleasant, or am I more calm? Am I more do I have more clarity? So those kind of experiences, do you come across those two? What do you tell people?
What was your first question?
First was like it was just a follow up note that people who don't think they can stand with their own mind, the space within their head, and that makes them restless. Like when you begin to meditate, you're looking in a mirror in a way, and seeing your own space in your own head isn't a pleasant sight for a lot of people, and that's why people quit. That's why people say, oh, maybe it's not for me. If you come across these experiences, what do you tell people?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people don't, continue, or they stop practicing after the class. I tell people, number one, when you do practice, see how it makes you feel. Check in with your body. A lot of times it grounds people to start their day off right. And it doesn't have to be a long time. I mean, 15 minutes is really all you need to do to get, grounded. But yeah, unfortunately, restlessness is something that many people struggle with, to sit in silence. And I think you had mentioned something of how do you make relationships if our own mind is, constantly going and we're judging ourselves. I think that really depends on who you are trying to engage with. If you're engaging with people that are the same, they're probably not going to notice that you're doing that, right? I'm very aware of people when I'm engaging with them, if they're actually interested in what I have to say, and I'm interested in what they have to say. And so because that's where my mind is, because I'm very present with people. I listen well with people when they're talking to me. And so I actually expect that same thing in return. So then I know, right? Because my mind is different, and the people I'm engaging with, it's different. But I think it all takes practice, and that's what I tell the participants. It's a lifelong practice. Like going to the gym. You're not just going to exercise, right? You're not going to just exercise like for a class for 5 weeks and then never exercise again. You're going to get your blood work done, and you're going to see high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, right? Same with eating well. So what makes your mind training any different?
Yeah. Eventually, it's a muscle that you have to train, and I think rightly so. It's called practice because you've got to keep doing that. You've got to keep trying that. How does your day look like? Do you also believe that the first 5 to 10 minutes of your day, when you wake up and you start your day, the first things that you do after you wake up kind of define or set the tone for the rest of the day, or at least for half of the day, until you maybe come across something more pleasant or more, say, negative? Does it affect, or does this make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I notice when I practice, I feel calmer.
Mm-hmm.
I check in with myself if my mind is in a negative space. I give
Mm-hmm.
myself some compassion. I say, okay, be kind to yourself today. You know, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm particularly tired, okay, don't do so much, right? It helps guide how I want to go about my day with how, I'm feeling. I'm honoring that, space. And so, absolutely. And it also helps me just make better decisions throughout the day of, okay, let me just take a few deep breaths right now because I'm just a little sad, or, it's what I'm doing is hard, or I'm getting frustrated, right? Um, so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely helps. And I kind of want to touch on I think it was another question you had about the outcome when
Mm-hmm.
we're practicing. You know,
Yeah.
expectations are the worst thing we can ever have as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Expectations of other people,
Mm-hmm.
expectations of our practice. So I always tell people when I teach, can we have an intention and not an expectation? Let go of the outcome. Because really, everyone always asks me in class, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this? I said, to just be in the present moment without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And people just cannot understand that. They're like, what do you
Mm-hmm.
mean? Something's got to happen. Why would I do
Yeah.
this? Why would I spend this time and money? And then I said, well, the byproduct may be focus and clarity
Mm-hmm.
and calmness and less thoughts. But if that's why you're practicing, that's your expectation, you're constantly thinking of the outcome. So if you
Mm-hmm.
do a meditation and then you're like, oh, do I have less thoughts or am I calmer? That's never,
Yeah.
expectations are not the best thing because we can't control everything. It's so much is out of our power, right? That's that insight wisdom we get.
Exactly. And I think that question itself begs some attention. Like, are we taking life so granted that experiencing being in the moment is such a small thing? Like, living is it too sort of, does this hold no value to us, that living in the moment is so small to us, the perception of life is so small that we're expecting something greater than this when we meditate? I think that should sort of be the highest place to be. Anything that we aspire, anything that we want to have and do in life is eventually to live life. And if we are able to do that in the moment without even um, uh, raising a hand, then what's better than that? But I think it's all about the perception. You mentioned that you create programs for workplace well-being and help people at workplaces. Um, as part of my work, I am also kind of helping young adults at workplaces. Workplace loneliness is my area of focus. What I would love to hear about from you is what is happening at workplaces. Why is, how did this term come into place? Workplace loneliness. It wasn't there until a few years ago. I don't know the exact time of the origin of this term, but what do you think? What is your understanding?
Well, I think it probably happened during the pandemic.
Hmm.
Um, we all went remote. We're all at home. I also think that in the workplace, we're tasked to do a lot. I think the amount of meetings that people have in the workplace is ridiculous. I'm not really sure how anyone gets any work done if they have 5, 6 meetings in a day. I mean, that's half your day. And then, in between meetings, you might have 30 minutes. You don't really have time to get any deep work done, right? So you get stuck on your phone or just checking random emails. And then you have so much digital communication coming at you. You have email, you have instant messenger, you have your phone, right? And it's all not with real people. Like you're not actually in the presence of real people. And, that causes loneliness. When I was in the office, it was great. I could walk over to someone's desk. We could laugh. If I was in a cubicle, we would laugh. We would just kind of say things out loud. It was fun. I mean, you had a sense of community at work, which I think is lacking nowadays. I'm not really sure how to get it back. I think on the flip side of that, the remote workplace has been really great for parents, especially. You get balance, you do save time, right? You're not in traffic. So again, it's like social media, it's good and bad, but I do think that it has caused a lot of loneliness. And I think the younger generation doesn't know any different, especially the ones that came out of college during COVID. So they don't even know what it feels like to connect in that way. So they don't even realize they are lonely.
But yeah, but eventually, like, this is fundamental to human beings. And it's like being hungry. You would know if you're hungry, even if you don't know what food is or what hunger is. So your body will tell you that. And so, in absence of a right term, in absence of that fulfillment, you would seek something. You would no. It's like a child, a little baby, and when it's hungry, it starts crying. When it's sleepy, it starts crying. When it's craving the mother's touch, it starts crying. All it knows is to cry, and you have to interpret as a mother or as a parent that, okay, what does the child need now? Similarly, like, if even if they don't know, the young adults that I'm talking about, they don't know what is like to be fulfilled or what is loneliness, or if they are experiencing it. um, it's all it's all part of our existence. It's all part of our mind, our essential trait to have. Now, when you experience that, and I think we are seeing the impact today. Younger people, young adults, are the ones who are seeking most spirituality. And they all may have their own definitions of it. They all may look at it differently, but then they're all seeking. They're all like 60%. I was reading a survey. 60% American adults are now seeking spirituality, and there are different categories like spiritual but not religious, religious and spiritual, no religion but spirituality, in so many categories. But then that sort of gives you a sign to, or it's kind of a signal that there's something missing. There's something substantially missing that they begin to realize. And not just, I mean, workplace thing that you spoke about. It's not that it's just people feeling in a certain way, and that's fine. It has economical impact. I think overall there was a number. I think some 30 billion plus is lost due to workplace loneliness every year in the U.S. alone. Productivity, employees, people calling in sick, or even not being in that. I like that word that you said, being in that deep state, the state of flow, when they're at work and completely losing themselves in the work that they're doing. So that gratification that comes with your work is gone, because you don't feel that you're connected. You don't feel part of community. That sense of belonging is not there. And if it's not there, a major chunk of the workplace, the work life satisfaction that you get from doing something meaningful is not there. And that's one of the greatest aspirations, to grow, to work harder, to seek promotion, to seek growth. And if there's no motivation to grow, why would you do anything at all? I think the productivity and all that. But my point is, like, when we, in my experience, when we interact with people at workplaces, some of them have a very strange understanding of this, as in, and particularly after COVID, and those who are in their first job today, being in software or finance or anything else, is that they don't know, this was nowhere part of the conversation, or when they were in the college, this was nowhere as part of the conversation and their understanding that apart from getting paid well, good company, good job, good everything else, this also will be a metric that they should be looking out for. Nobody taught them that meaning that comes from doing your job will be the greatest thing that you should look for. And the impact of that, I mean, they are yet to see, but people in their 30s and 40s are seeing midlife crisis or not finding their work meaningful, hence turning inward and looking for things that they think, oh, this is what I meant to do. This is my purpose, and I've made that money. I've been part of that horse race, and I've worked hard enough, but that hasn't brought me anything. But so now people begin to look for younger people. I think are also beginning to look inside more. Perhaps not the ones who are in their first jobs, but then those who've spent a few years and then they're beginning to realize that meaning and purpose or fulfillment should be a greatest metric that they'll have to look for when they choose a career or they choose a job. And that's fascinating. It wasn't there earlier. It maybe was there, but not on such a scale that it is today.
Right.
Do you think, where I'm coming with this point, do you think silently somewhere that craving to belong, that those few traits like meaning, purpose, fulfillment, belonging are the things that we have ignored for long, and now they have become louder and more obvious in the community, at workplaces, university campuses, or even in the subway or in
Mm-hmm.
public places? Like you don't say, hey, how was your day? You don't meet people unless you really have need to meet. You know, iMessage is good enough, I guess. So what do
Right.
you think?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think purpose and meaning in what we do is so important. But it's also a big word because sometimes we just need to make money to survive.
Yeah, true.
And that's okay too. Not everyone's going to find their purpose. And I think people that feel like they have to are judging themselves, right? When I was in the finance profession, I didn't love what I did, but I knew I was providing for my family. I knew that that's what I needed to do, you know,
Yeah.
because my children were my purpose. Does that
Yes.
make
True.
sense? So
True.
they were
Yes.
my purpose. So I think it's, and then I did find my purpose. Like I was fortunate. I found this teaching and I pursued it. I had the support, right, of my husband and my family. And it is definitely, when I teach, I light up. I love it. But I think the problem really lies with self-awareness and this society we live in of constantly being busy. We are so overscheduled. Um, we don't have time to check in with ourselves. There isn't self-awareness. So
Yeah.
I do agree. I think the younger generation is turning inward. Some of them, I've definitely taught my daughters to turn inward. And my husband and I have always said, do what you love. And so, again, it comes from role modeling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think if we can slow down a little bit and not feel like we always have to produce, maybe we will find more belonging and authentic connections with ourselves, which will result
Yeah.
in connection with other people, like authentic relationships, right? Not these, superficial ones.
Yeah. True. And I think, yeah, you said it right. Somewhere in the picture, when you were doing things that you did not like, maybe not personally with you, but there was a purpose that was sort of pushing you to do things that you had to do, and be part of a job that you did not like. But and I'm not against making money or taking care of survival, because even when your survival is at question, you can't think about purpose. You can't think about your passion, your meaning and stuff. Sometimes you've got to do things that you've got to do. Um, but then there are people who've a lot of YouTube experiments. People ask who've made millions, who've made enough money, and say, was the money worth it? And I think after a certain number, after the survival is met, the essential needs are taken care of, then the graph begins to decline. The graph of satisfaction and uh, that kind of zeal that comes from making more money loses its charm over
Mm-hmm.
time, I think. So essentially, meaning and purpose and all those things, yes, a part of this, but how do we fix it? That remains the major problem. We see loneliness is growing. We see people are the the surveys that are done, happiness surveys and life satisfaction and so many other things, other metrics are, I don't know how accurate they are or how trustworthy they are. Trustworthy in the sense that it's such a personal experience, loneliness and happiness. How do you get the right number? It's very difficult. But essentially, it reflects in people's lives. That's the best survey. You hear and you see people talking. Um, what would what if we could go back 5, 10, 20 years, because loneliness is not a new phenomenon. COVID did not introduce this. It was already brewing up. It just magnified it. What should we be doing today so that the young adults today who are suffering, 1 in 3, I think 1 in 3 or 1 in 2, between 18 to 25, is always to almost always lonely.
Hmm. Yeah.
And and the sad thing is, I, and I mean, it's I have to talk about this, but we'll also move on to the brighter side. The sad thing is people, young people, and there have been instances where they were partying last night and the next morning they took their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible. What that points towards is that you can never judge by looking at somebody's face and somebody's present state of mind. You could seem happy, but there's so many masks that we're wearing. You don't know what's going on in somebody's mind. What could we do? Somebody's got to be. I mean, a lot of people, I think, they need help, but they shy away accepting loneliness or anything, depression or overall their mental well-being. What can we do as a community to make a large-scale impact, like a real, meaningful impact?
Well, I think just, people like yourself and me, putting awareness out there um, on how we can kind of overcome this, whether it's developing that connection with yourself and
Mm-hmm.
making decisions to have more authentic friendships, with
Mm-hmm.
people, which doesn't mean quantity, right? It's more
Yeah. Yes.
quality.
True.
I think that's really important. And also, I think we have to start having more an open mind with one another and
Mm-hmm.
curiosity. I feel like our world, especially here in America, is so like you and me and or it's like no, my way's right. No, and we don't have enough understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And you named it, right? Every single one of us has problems.
Yeah.
And we don't know the facade, right? That's another problem with social media. We think everyone's on vacation, everyone's going to a party. Oh, my life is great. We don't know what's going on. We really
Yes.
don't. And I think that's another problem that makes us feel empty because we feel isolated, like it's only me that's struggling.
Yeah.
But that's not true. Every human being is struggling. And every human being, I do think, has struggled some type of a loneliness.
Yes.
So I think just teaching, bringing this awareness like you're doing, which I think is great. And then really just, you know, doing the work or, kind of getting off your phone, getting off the social media kind of asking a friend, let's go for a walk, or go for a walk by yourself and see what that feels like, and just try to be with the discomfort a little bit. Um,
Mm.
so I think those are just some ways. And then hopefully, trying to create communities instead of groups. I read an article,
Yes.
I loved it. It talked about the difference between a group and a community. And a
Yeah.
group is where people are very exclusive, and you have to think like them and you have to be like them, and they don't really respect the differences. And a community is more where you're accepted, and you really people are curious and want to learn from each other, right? They welcome. It's a very welcoming environment. So
Yeah.
pick the community over wanting to be in a group, which is what we often think of, right? Since we're in high school and, oh, I want to be
Yeah.
part of this popular group, right? I think that type of just giving that awareness, especially to the younger people, starting as young as middle school and high school.
Yeah, good thing you mentioned that. Is I wish, if I could imagine myself back in school, I wish there was a school of awareness. The term itself is now so, and in the East it used to be the case. Like the Hindu education system. I'm not promoting anything, but the gurukuls were schools of wisdom. We taught things about you first, helping you learn and meeting yourself, and then making sense of the knowledge that is given to you and turning that knowledge into wisdom and kind of giving a sense of um, usefulness with that knowledge that is being given in terms of a skill, and skill um, driven by wisdom. You know.
Yeah.
You could be a nuclear scientist and you still might not have wisdom or the sense of a moral purpose that drives you. And it actually it turns it turns very dangerous if you have such a power and you don't have sense of wisdom, sense of moral
Right, absolutely.
compass in
I
the right
think in
place.
our society and all over the world, right, the technical skills have been
Yeah,
so overemphasized. How many degrees do you have, right?
yeah,
That's what makes your
yeah,
status, right? It's
yes,
that's how it is.
yeah,
Especially in our Indian culture, is, are you an MD? Are you an
yeah,
engineer? Are you,
yeah.
do you have an MBA? And so all of these, I like to call them human skills, have been
Mm-hmm.
neglected. So to
Yes,
your point, how do people even know that they're lonely? How do they even know how to make decisions based on values in their life? Because no one's taught them this. And you can't always blame their parents because they weren't taught that. It's just an ongoing cycle that
yeah,
needs to be broken. And so even at the whole the whole University of California, we did this pilot program
mm-hmm.
on climate change, resilience and climate change. And my part of teaching it was to bring in the mindfulness component.
Mm-hmm.
And the transformation of these students was incredible. And so
Yeah,
now we're starting to make a regular course, and I'm
mm-hmm.
hoping more and more colleges give just as much emphasis, like you
Yeah,
said, to having this awareness as they do to these technical skills, which you need
yes,
both, because
true.
that's exactly why our organizations are getting burnt out, because you
Yeah,
don't have leaders that were taught these human skills.
yes. I very well said, very well framed, and I think in addition to what you've mentioned, I think those human skills. Not that there is a school, and I wish there was. But even before you learn ABC, you should be taught why do you have to learn this, and what can you do once you learn this. But in so like, emphasizing on what you said about getting into that fierce rat race of collecting a pile of degrees and skills to name and all that thing. This is never going to end. But the negative thing is, so like you said, how people don't even know they're lonely. loneliness is such a powerful, in a negative way, it's such a powerful feeling that it's like a water leakage. If the water is leaking somewhere, it will show up. Maybe in the wall, maybe on the floor, maybe somewhere else on the street. It will show up, but with negative consequences. And we don't want that to happen to young people. Nobody wants that. And I think, and that's the challenge. I think I personally came across this challenge, like when we were reaching out to schools and universities and talk about loneliness. It's not accepted yet as a real problem, a real damage that it can make. It is making. It's not. It'll happen 5 years in the future. It's happening today. You ask people. People look at their phones and crave that. I wish somebody just call or text me and ask, "Hey, how was your day?" And people are just sitting waiting for other people to reach out. So when we were reaching out to universities, like, I really don't care about the 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 other practical self-awareness business that is there, flourishing, actually, selling self-awareness in the packages, and making people believe that all that there should be is you and nothing beyond that. It's hurting a lot of people. But what we face as an obstacle is that people were not in that position where they could experience themselves. Exactly what I said in the beginning of this discussion, that if I didn't experience this, I wouldn't be as authentic as I can be today. If I'm listening to you, you will feel that it's real experience. You would know that this guy is faking. He hasn't been through this. So that, I wish, was the case, that people were more accepting of this as a real challenge, real problem that young people are facing. And I think the first chapter of anything that we learn formally should be learn ourselves, because that's the house you've to identify. That's the place where you will keep everything that you will learn and collect, your skills, your awards, your titles, like you said. If you don't know your house, where are you going to keep things? So that house of self, that inward, is the path, I think. And I wish there were more people like you doing what we're doing. Um, Other challenge, and probably we'll wrap up with this. Other challenge that a lot of people are facing in terms of loneliness is that it's so personal. It's so personal that it's not like COVID, that it's accepted everywhere. It's like, hey, if you have these symptoms, 1 2 3, go and get treatment, get yourself admitted, and also get a vaccine shot. In case of loneliness, as physical as it is, it leads to diabetes, it leads to cardio issues, cardiac issues, it leads to inflammation, it leads to, in a lot of cases, stress and depression, very much physical. But the challenge is that, people feel that it's so personal that I'm not understood. A lot of people. I was reading a comment on Reddit, and says, the guy posted that, why do I feel like I am? People are walking through me. Where do I feel like a leftover person? I use that in earlier discussion as well. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
People feel that they are inaudible and invisible to everybody else. The sense of community is lost. So they feel that even if we are, I believe that creating awareness is not enough. Like, we have to, if I make you aware that this is a real problem and there is help. In my case, if I was experiencing, the next question I would ask is, okay, accepted, what do I do now? Where do I go? Who do I reach out to?
Yeah.
Because there has to be a platform. You just don't want to diagnose my problem and make me feel that, okay, I have accepted, but then what? Then where do I go? And I
Yeah.
think
I
through,
mean, I'm going through that right now. I'm literally trying to create my own community
Yeah.
because so many of my own friends are, in transition. They don't
Mm-hmm.
live here anymore, or they're not around, or they live somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I would say to that is, once you have that awareness, the next step really, and I even tell my daughters this, is know what your values are
Yeah.
and try to go to those people that share those values.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you value authenticity, engage with people that are authentic. And we know who's not authentic. I mean, you
Yeah.
get to a certain age, especially, people that are saying one, if your actions and what you say don't align, people aren't authentic.
Yeah.
And it takes time and it's really hard. I'm not gonna lie, it's really, really hard because, especially with people that have their friends already, right? So I think it's important to try to develop a community, but once we are having a connection with ourselves, and again, not to depend on people for that internal connection. Because I
Yeah.
think you said it earlier, that if we start depending, oh, I've met this new friend, oh, she's going to cure all my problems, I'm not going to be lonely anymore,
That
that
don't
becomes a
happen.
codependent relationship, and that's just not
Yes.
healthy, and that's not going to
Yeah.
work. So
Yes.
you go into and you create your own community of people, and that just takes time. You can't authentic friendships where you can feel psychologically safe with people, it takes
Hmm.
time. And so it's I don't know what other answer there is really.
I do have something to add, and it has come from my personal experience. If you, in all the authenticity, have realized who you are, values, and everybody's born with a gift. People who think they're not, you've not found it yet, you are. Um, Once you realize, and so realization of those values and the gift and the authenticity, your own picture, that's 50% of the task done. Believe me, it has happened, and I'm convinced that it's law of nature. Once you realize who you are, you'll start attracting people who fit into that picture perfectly, and you will start repelling everybody else. People will see that. This conversation, like I said off camera, we'll see how long it goes. And there have been times, 30 minutes, and I was wondering, hey, I think we're not going where the flow is there, the energies are there. But you will start attracting people. Like, it's been an hour and I didn't notice, because once you find those values, you will start attracting people with the similar values, and it happens automatically. So
Yeah.
once you've crossed the river of realizing who you are, it is all easy from there. And second, on the final note I would make, and probably it's for somebody who needs to hear it. If you're suffering, we all have problems, like you said, we all have challenges. If you're suffering, um, pain is making space for what's exactly opposite of that is required. If you are in pain, you're making space for compassion.
Mm.
Otherwise, where would you find it? Where would you go and look for it?
Yeah.
If you are restless, you're making space for more calm in your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you are angry, you need love.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I love it.
just that.
I mean, you're absolutely right. Once we can know who we are and what we value, I agree with you. And cut out all the other noise, it'll happen naturally. I
People will take U-turns the moment they see who you are, and they feel that this is not uh, who I sort of where I belong. In case of a friendship or any relationship, people will make U-turns the moment they come close to you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that has happened in my life. I've closed certain doors and I've
Yeah.
gotten some beautiful friendships because I made more space for those because I got rid of the other ones. And so I think that's a great suggestion once, we start learning how to be with ourselves and accept how we are and what we value. We make more space. We don't spend as much time and energy on that other, those other relationships.
And it's very simple also. Like, if you're not happy with yourself, if you're not joyful within your own mind, which is again his space, what makes us believe that other people will be joyful there? Because when people want to relate to you in any capacity, what they're looking for is a peaceful space to be in.
Mhm.
Like, you can't be in a healthy relationship if you two fight all the time, or
Right.
if the person is insecure or not appreciated. So, so maybe before we invite guests, we clean up our house and decorate, have a good fragrance, and people will be attracted. Really. Loved the conversation, Cheryl. Every
Yeah.
moment of it.
Yeah,
Thank you very
thank
much
you.
again. Do you have a departing note for people? Something that could travel to millions of people's lives as a light of hope? Anything you want to share? Say.
Well, I think, I do think it's really important uh, to express compassion toward yourselves, and then that'll help give you more capacity to give compassion to other people. Because then I think we're all struggling. I think every one of us is. And so when we can start coming from that place of kindness and curiosity, maybe we can develop those communities and feel a little less lonely.
Beautiful. I hope it reaches to those who need to hear it and projects in their life as a light of hope. Once again, thank you very much. Beautiful time. Well, and there's always one thing that kind of I observe and let it sort of settle inside me, is that the time that we spent having this discussion was invested so beautifully that it's going to remain in my mind and my stories to tell. And you have a space inside my memories now. And thank you very much for that, and wish you good life.
Thank you very much, Sitendra. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.